Is everybody ready?
I'm ready.
All right. We will go ahead and call the Becker City Council meeting of May 4th, 2021 to order. If you could rise and join us with the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Has council had an opportunity to review the meeting minutes of April 20th? If so, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
I make a motion we approve the minutes from April 20th, April 6th, wasn't it?
April 20th.
20th. Yes, it's
We are in
April,
May
yes,
already.
April 20th, yes.
I'll second.
Motion from Mike, second from Robin. Any discussion on them? Hearing none, those in favor can state aye.
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 Opposed? Carried. Any changes to this evening's agenda? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the set agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Motion from Robin, second from Rick. Those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Guest and open forum this evening. Anyone here to address the city council? Anybody? Oh, sorry. We have the 22, I was going to get that, Connie. Thank you, though. 2020 annual audit presentation.
I wasn't sure if this is where I was.
Yes, this
supposed to
is.
join. All right, good evening, everyone. Madam Mayor, council members, thank you for giving me some time to go over the results of our audit tonight.
You can take your mask off up there if you want.
Okay. Might be easier to hear me. All right, so I did pull the highlights out of the books and put them into this PowerPoint presentation to ease talking through it. So I'd like to start out by talking about the independent auditor's report. So this is the summary of the audit, and it is the most important letter in the document. It's in the front of the financial statements is where you'll find it. And basically summarizes the responsibility of management for those financial statements and then the responsibility of your auditors to give an opinion on the financial statements. And we're issuing an unmodified opinion, which is the best that we as your auditors can offer to you. It indicates that everything is fairly stated based on the results of the audit. In addition to that independent auditor's report, we do have some other reports that we are issuing. The first one has to do with government auditing standards. So because of some of the funding that you receive, we are required to take a closer look at your internal controls and also compliance with laws, regulations, contracts, and grants. Based on that, we did have one internal control finding, the lack of segregation of accounting duties. That's not new to the city of Becker, and really is at a pretty low level. So we have 3 buckets that we can put our findings into, the most severe being a material weakness, second being a significant deficiency, and then the lowest being just a control deficiency. This is at the significant deficiency level, but there are a lot of mitigating controls in place that the city has implemented that reduce the risk that goes along with that lack of segregation. So, and then we had no compliance findings related to those government auditing standards. And then our final official report is in accordance with Minnesota legal compliance. So the Office of the State Auditor on an annual basis issues a checklist, and it covers 7 broad categories of legal compliance. Things like deposits and investments, conflicts of interest, contracting, bidding, claims and disbursements, indebtedness. And based on our completion of that checklist, we had no findings for 2020. So all good there. And then we have another document, the communication letter, and in there we have several pages of what is called required communication. So these are things that our standards require that we put in writing to all of you as the governing body. It would be our tool if we had anything significant that we uncovered, if we had any difficulties or disagreements with management, and I'm happy to report that we had none of that this year. So a clean bill of health, if you will, related to all of that. And then finally, we have financial analysis, and that's what I'm going to spend most of tonight going over with you. Questions on any of those reports?
The thing you brought up about not a very severe issue, would you explain that a bit more?
Yeah, so when we look at your internal controls, there's basically a segregation needed in all steps of a transaction. So you have a limited number of people, but the city has done a good job of segregating wherever possible. There are just a few things that there's still some overlap. And even when there is overlap, there's typically a review that comes after it that mitigates that segregation. So it's still there. There is a lack of segregation, but there are reviews and other backups in place to reduce the level of the risk related to it.
Is there a recommendation to that, for that issue?
You know, the lack of segregation is a tough one because it's really a cost versus benefit decision that's made at the city level. So in order to completely segregate, you'd have to hire additional people. So it's really weighing that risk that you're accepting versus the cost of completely eliminating the finding.
Yeah.
So we had some discussion, we had probably more discussion about this than anything else at the presentation for the Budget and Finance Committee.
Sure.
This is not so much on the city, it's the fact that the fire board finances run through the city, and this was specifically having to deal with the fire board.
Yeah, that's where most of the issue lies. And that's why it's not as severe as what we may see at some other cities, because most of what is going on for the city of Becker itself is segregated. But there are some issues with the fire department and the expenditures and the way they run through.
But with our agreement, we really couldn't change that anyway, could we? The way our fire agreement is set up, aren't we kind of stuck to what we're doing?
It's more of an operational issue. I wouldn't say that's not something that can't be changed, in my opinion. It would be more.
That's what I'm getting at.
I thought we had made the adjustments to make sure that that segregation wasn't as
Some,
much.
yes. Not all the way though.
Right.
We did better from what we received at Budget and Finance. There was some in place. I know the vendor, the fact that the vendors can go straight to the website and submit POs right through there, that mitigated some of it. And then maybe, I don't know if you know what the other controls are that.
Yeah, I think we listed them. Off the top of my head, I don't know the details of all of it. But I do know that each of the years that we've been working with the city, there have been improvements. And I think if you remember last year, we had a timely payment issue also with the fire department. That we saw a lot less of that, so we removed that as a written finding. Yeah, so basically what we have is our bullet point that explains the lack of segregation, and one of the current concerns that we see is that the same person serving on the fire board is responsible for collecting mail, approving accounts payable, and in some cases, acting as the signatory on those direct payments. So yes, it helps what you've implemented, but it doesn't eliminate it completely. And that part of it is what's raising it to a written finding. There are still some other miscellaneous things that there's some overlap, but the fire board is really what raises it to written and significant deficiency.
Okay.
Any other questions on that? All right, then we'll move to the financial information, and what we have are charts that show a 5-year high-level perspective, but we're really going to just pretty much key in on 2019 versus 2020 when we discuss these. So first of all, the chart looks at your overall general fund balance. So you can see each year it has been increasing, and the increase for 2020 was about $358,000. And when you look at that ending $2,737,000, almost all of that, $2,713,000 is unrestricted and available for spending at your discretion. Looking a little bit more into the details then, we start with the revenues, and the first chart, again, takes a look at those 5 years, and you can see that increasing trend overall. And when we compare 2019 to 2020, you see about a 12.7% increase, which equates to about $504,000. Two categories contributing to most of that increase. First of all, taxes and assessments were up about 172, flowing right along with the increase in the levy for the year. And then the category right below taxes and assessments is the intergovernmental category. And that almost actually more than doubled for this year, and it had to do with the coronavirus relief funds that the city received during the year. So that increased about $361,000 from 2019 to 2020. And when we compare the revenues to what you had budgeted or what you had planned to receive, a similar discussion. The largest variance comes in that intergovernmental category, which was over budget by $342,000. Again, those CRF funds coming in that weren't anticipated, because certainly we couldn't have anticipated 2020. Overall, revenues were over budget by about 13%. And again, most of it coming in that category. But then also if you look at the other category, that's over about $95,000, and that has to do with just conservative budgeting for some of those miscellaneous revenues, including investment income. And then one last chart that looks at your general fund by source. And this chart really highlights the reliance of the general fund on those taxes, the property taxes. And you can see there is a bit of a shift in 2020, going from 85% of the total down to 79%. And that's, again, not a reduction in the taxes, but really just an increase in that intergovernmental category that increased from 5 to 12% for the year. Switching gears then to look at the expenditures in the general fund. Again, you see that overall increasing trend. Expenditures were up 4.6% for the year. Two categories that had some more significant increases. First of all, general government, up about $63,000 due to the hiring of an IT manager in 2020. And then your public safety increased about $64,000, and that had to do with increased wages, those cost of living increases, and then also some inspection costs greater than what you saw in 2019. We have a budget to actual presentation for those same expenditures. And overall, expenditures were actually under budget, about 4.6%, and most of that came in general government, and that is conservative budgeting again, and had to do with anticipating greater costs for the IT manager, and then also city planners that had been contracted out in previous years. So some changes there. And then finally, looking at those expenditures by function, now we saw the overall increasing trend each year, but your spending has been consistent by category. So it's exactly the same for the last 3 years, spending 35% on general government, 30% on public safety, and then 29% on public works, being the 3 largest that you see there. Questions on the general fund or anything you'd like to know more about? All right, then we'll move to the enterprise funds. First of all, your water utility operations. After increasing significantly in 2019, operating revenues were down in 2020, and that had to do with fewer WAC fees collected during the year. Expenses in the fund were actually up, related to increased wages and then also increased pension expense. Overall, we look at your operating income in 2 ways, one with depreciation and one without depreciation, because depreciation is that non-cash expenditure that you have, using up your assets over their useful life. So it's good to look at them both ways, but the positive for your city and the water fund is that you have operating income in both cases. So you are covering all operating expenses, both current and non-cash, with the depreciation. And then your sewer fund is the last fund that we're going to look at. So operating revenues in this fund were up with some increased usage for the year. Operating expenses were also up. Again, wages and that pension expense contributing to most of that increase. And so you did have an operating loss. It was less of an operating loss than last year. And when we factor out that non-cash depreciation, you had a pretty significant income. So you're covering about 58% of your depreciation expense. So allowing the net position or the equity, the value in both this fund and the water fund to increase each year. So saving for future costs that you're going to have. And then just one last chart that takes a look at your tax capacity, levy, and rates. So when we look at this, you can see the bottom line there, that's your levy. We talked about the increase that you had for this year, and you see that there. Your tax capacity actually decreased just a little bit during 2020, so that created a small increase in the rate from 2019 to 2020. But overall, your tax capacity has increased from 16.3 million up to 17.7, almost 17.8 in the 5 years that we're looking at. Any questions?
I don't think so. We asked a lot of them at Budget and Finance, so.
Good, I'm glad Jackie was able to meet with you in person for that as well. All right, well, before I go, I would like to thank Connie and her team for being very well prepared for the audit, and thank all of you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving into committee reports. Budget and Finance.
We just went through the audit, basically.
Sounds good. Fire Relief Association. Connie, did you attend that one for us? I was not able to attend. Okay. There is a special meeting on the 6th. Okay. All right, May 6th. Planning Commission.
Yeah, Planning Commission, we had a pretty busy slate. We had some public hearings, which are on our items C, D, and E under number 8 tonight, so I won't go into detail on those really. We called for a public hearing on the accessory structure height, which is something that we've talked about for a while now, the garage heights and such. So we did call for that public hearing. That's going to be at our meeting in the end of May. We discussed recreational vehicle operation on the public roads. The chief, he stepped out. Chief was there to present on that. And after just working with the league to get some policy stuff in place, we did have some questions as far as like the fee schedule and that, because there would, if you were gonna do a fee, you would have to present that at the same time. If you were to say, okay, we're gonna change the ordinance to allow it, and we're gonna have a fee of, $5 or whatever for the tag, you'd have to change the ordinance that night too. So, there was a little bit of homework to go back for the chief. He's gonna bring that back to the next meeting. And then there's a pretty good chance we would see it probably after that.
Yeah, there was some fees and some other things that we asked him to look into.
So he's gonna report.
He's gonna bring it back next month, and then we'll proceed from there.
And then we had some discussion on minimum lot width. I don't remember if we had that here before. Okay, yeah, so we had that discussion at Planning Commission as well. So that was what I got for Planning Commission.
All right, joint planning, we had 2 issues. We had to amend a resolution that was completed in the past due to a directional change, east to a west, and then a boundary adjustment. That was it. So, how about Golf Committee?
You wanna take it?
Sure. Go committee. I do not have my paperwork because yours, I mean, we didn't.
Okay, we went over our numbers, which are really good
They're great.
last year. And then we discussed our ADA compliance at the clubhouse, because we're not. And we also were looking at the addition for the simulators, which we'll be talking about a little bit during the executive session. And we had a couple concerns about some water leakage and stuff like that. That was it.
Yeah.
All right, any other committee reports? All right, moving on to board, committee, and consultant reports. A water and domestic sewer utility rate study with Lori.
All right, thank you for inviting me to speak tonight. So what we have on the agenda tonight is a presentation of the water and domestic sewer utility rate study. And just as some background, in 2016, that was Becker's last water and domestic wastewater rate study. And we used that rate study to set utility rates for 2017 through 2021 budget cycle, so ending with our current budget. And the current study that you'll be seeing tonight is the compilation of input from the water, domestic wastewater department employees, supervision, the public works director, input from planning and economic development, as well as the finance staff and the budget and finance committee have all been through this data and reviewed and compiled and done some analysis to project for you what we see going forward as rates for the domestic water and sewer budgets. So just as some background, water and sewer utilities are extremely capital intensive. As you saw in the audit presentation, the level of depreciation that these two budgets carry indicate that there is a lot of capital investment that takes place and then is managed over a long period of time as we deliver services to our residents. And so not only is it capital intensive, but it's critical function because people expect and should expect for the utilities to function 24/7 in a manner that meets their needs. So one of the things that is different than our other funds for the water and sewer fund is that they are actually enterprise funds, which is the reason that you saw them presented separately in the audit report, is they're not part of your general fund. They are a different type of fund, and they really have to earn their own way, right? So they're generally not something that's levied for, but the rates that are charged and recovered for that service are what have to fund that enterprise fund going forward over a period of time. So the last study was done 5 years ago, and it is our intent to do a study every 3 to 5 years and keep it refreshed so that we can use it to set rates over a 3 to 5 year period and give some stability and kind of looking forward and knowing what we're going to need to recover for rates from our ratepayers in order to finance our enterprise funds. So the goal of the study really is to set up that framework so that we know how much cash those funds are projected to need over a period of time, and we can recover that back from our ratepayers as we go and be saving for those future capital intensive needs. So those are the goals. In your packet you have the goals of the study. And one of the other goals that's important, because it's by statute in the state of Minnesota, we need to have a tiered water rate structure so that we continue to promote water conservation. So this rate study does accomplish that and meet that statutory requirement. What we have done in putting this together is we have taken a cash needs approach. So we're really trying to project what are the cash needs that we're going to need in this enterprise going forward. We started by looking at historical data. We also did an analysis of current data using 2020 information and gathering the information from our new financial billing system. We built a forecast for 2021 that we did use during the budget planning cycle, so we're already starting to use some of the output of the study. And then we built a 5-year forecasted revenue model that meets the capital needs over that time frame. Why is targeted cash important? It's really important because, as we said earlier, you have to meet the needs of your ratepayers over the long term, right? They expect the utility to function 24 hours a day, 365 days a week, or 365 days a year. You don't get downtime. And so keeping the financial sustainability is really critical for these enterprise funds. We did go back and look at what the American Water Works Association has for guidelines for what their cash reserve policies are. And so that is one of the baselines that we use in trying to determine what level of cash reserves we want to build or need to maintain. And so we did take a look at what that means and came up with a formula of how we want to build our rates in order to meet this certain cash projection. And so you can see this is an incredibly detailed model, and so at a really high level, the baseline is that we want to have 75% of the next year's operating needs in hand as a cash reserve. This is not, an enterprise fund is not something we levy for. We don't get money from a levy twice a year to sustain the cash needs of the fund. So we need a little bit higher targeted level of cash in order to make sure that we're going to be able to meet the needs of the fund. So that is a little different than your general fund where you have a 40% operating cost reserve. So that's why it's a little bit different. We did a comparison to other cities and their rate studies that they have published recently, and we find that this, what we're recommending is in line with what other cities are using. They're using between 3 to 12 months, and so we're using 9 months in this study, so we feel like this is a good recommendation for us. The Budget and Finance Committee has reviewed that in some level of detail, and they are in line with the recommendation that we would continue on the water side to do a 2% annual increase to rates, including the base rate, the monthly service fee rate, and the tiered usage rates. And so that is very consistent with what we've been doing in the past, and the model would forecast that that would give us our targeted level of cash reserves if we continue to do that. On the domestic sewer side, the recommendation is to continue a 2% annual increase in the base rate and a 4% annual increase in the tier 2 usage rate. So if people are using more than the base level, the rate increase would be higher than it would be just on the base usage. And this will help us to make sure that we can accommodate unforeseen expenditures or revenue shortfalls. And then again, we would recommend continuing to do the rate study every 3 to 5 years and make sure that we're able to meet our cash projection needs. And so then in your packet, you have the detailed graphs of what that looks like for targeted cash and how much cash it would leave us unrestricted beyond that amount. So we have that for both the water utility and the domestic sewer utility is in there as well. So if we look at what that means for an average billing impact, we did an assumption of how many gallons of usage we would see on the water side and on the sewer side, and put together this table that would indicate what that would mean for an average utility bill. So on the water side, it would be an average increase of 2%, and on the sewer side, it would be an average increase of 3%. And when you add those two together, the average projected rate increase that we're recommending for water and sewer for a residential customer would average out to about 2.9% of what they would see on their bill. And then there's a lot of detail for our budget and finance people who love the detail to dig into. If they would so desire to, that walks through all the calculations and really brings it down to what is the level of cash that is necessary, and that's in your packet as well. Are there any questions from the council that I could answer?
I just have one, maybe a Chris question. Last time when we did this study, I believe we did the study first, and then afterwards when we actually went to set the rates, the DNR, because we have to run them by DNR, and they came back and said our rates were too low, and we had to bump one of our rates. I believe it was the top tier water, I want to say. I'm assuming we have to do that again?
I think we are currently compliant with the state statute for tiered water rates. So unless there is a change in the state statute for tiered water rates, I don't anticipate that we would have to adjust this further.
Okay, because we had tier before, they just didn't like the number. They felt it wasn't high enough and said we weren't encouraging conservation enough, and actually made us, well, they
Okay.
can't make us, they can strongly suggest
Sure.
we raise it, but.
I haven't heard any feedback from the latest DNR water report that we submitted, but we have submitted our annual report from last year. And I would anticipate that if they had feedback on that, that either we haven't received it yet or it didn't require a change to our tiered water rate structure.
We didn't receive any feedback from the DNR when we submitted our appropriation report, so that's where we're at right now.
Good to hear.
We did the water comp plan too, public health, and they didn't talked to me either regarding that, our rates or our tiered system, so we can check and see.
Well, I don't wanna ask him again, but.
That's the thing, do you want to go rock or not?
No.
Right. Okay. So then I would ask for the council if I could receive a motion and second to accept the utility rate study.
I'll make a motion to, accept the, water and domestic sewer utility rate study.
I'll second.
Motion from Rick, second from Becky. Any other discussion? Hearing none, those in favor can state aye.
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 Opposed? Carried.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lori. Job classification and total compensation study with Ms. Bleasy.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Take this off. So the City of Becker sent out a request for proposal for a job classification and total compensation study on February 17th. Following review of the proposals, the city requested Gallagher and Flaherty and Hood to present to our department leadership. Following the presentations, staff discussed and decided Gallagher would be the organization that we would offer the contract to if approved by council. Some of the reasons were the employee engagement piece of it, potential for a long-term relationship with Gallagher. They are countrywide, so they have access to a lot of documentation and information. They're very knowledgeable on the subject matter. They were very professional in their interactions with us during the presentation. They do have a strong endorsement from our city attorney, and we do currently work with Gallagher in our benefits area and are very pleased with what they provide to us for that. During the April 20th executive session, council did discuss this. Some of the reasons that we're moving forward with a compensation study right now were compression due to minimum wage increases that we're seeing, recruitment challenges that exist right now, and then just long-term retention of our employees and valuing them. So the agreement in your packet was sent to our city attorney, and there were no concerns on their end with the contract. The budgeted amount for this in our CIP was $19,500 for 2021. The proposal from Gallagher is for $31,500, which was a decrease from their original amount of $34,000. The comparative from Flaherty and Hood was $29,250, but for the reasons mentioned earlier, staff felt it was appropriate to offer it to Gallagher. So first off, I would ask for a motion and second to remove resolution 2021-28 from the table for further discussion by council.
I'll make a motion to, remove resolution 2021-28, from the table for further discussion.
Second.
Motion from Rick, second from Robin. Any discussion? Those in favor can state aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. We are now on the correct agenda.
So then I would take any questions council would have, or a motion and second to approve 21-28, authorizing Gallagher to complete a job classification and total compensation study for the city.
So can you, so you spoke to Gallagher since our last executive session meeting. Can you kind of give a summary of, that discussion?
So since the last discussion, I know there was some concern about COVID and how it may be affecting some of the compensation study side of it. So I did reach out, and I'll just read back the piece that Mike Verdorn from Gallagher had emailed back. He said that one key piece of information they have found through broader surveys, as well as an update survey done for Ramsey County, was that 60 to 80% of public sector organizations have moved forward with planned salary structure and pay increases. These averaged about 2 to 3% for salary structure or actual pay. So they are seeing movement in the market, even with COVID and what has been happening over the last year.
How about, in regards to, stale, the data being stale with the market? I guess, I think the question I had, it wasn't so much were employees getting raises or not, it was, is the market gonna look, I don't say radically different, but somewhat different enough that a year from now, if we look at this, that it's a completely different dance floor?
You know, they did not address that side of it, but I would speak to, I mean, just the competitive piece of it to get new employees in the door right now, even if it is a little bit stale, we need to be competitive to get our people in the door. So even with what we look at right now, this compensation study will be of value just to get new employees in and to retain what we currently have.
Do we currently have an issue with job openings not having any applicants?
In the higher level ones, I would say we do. Entry level, maybe not as much, although even with our community centers, some of those minimum wage ones, it can be difficult getting in employees, getting the applications in for them.
I am disappointed that, you know, we weren't budgeted correctly for this type of study, but I understand the need with the compressed minimum wage, how that affects us. But
Yeah, I understand the, well, I know we asked for an explanation, during the exec session as far as what happened with the price, you know, like you read, there was, you know, 19, whatever was in the CIP, when in reality it was a range. I guess going forward, we should, maybe reflect the range a little better on CIP, and maybe we pick the high end or something, you know, cause I think we said the range was, we were thinking it's possibly even as high as 40.
Correct.
So maybe we should be putting 40 in the,
Yep.
CIP and not 19, I guess.
Duly
That
noted for
sort of-
future, for sure.
As far as the stale data, I mean, I don't work in HR. It's just a gut feeling I have. I don't have a lot of data to back it up. So for me to make a strong no, I have a hard time doing that without the data. I mean, we are, you know, I think you mentioned maybe at the higher levels, this may be more of an issue. You know, and we do have a higher level employee, I will not call them by name in case, but we do have a higher level employee that is gonna be leaving the organization here pretty soon. So, that's something we didn't
Yep.
know 2 weeks ago. So.
But
So I guess
this
we're-
compensation study won't affect that hiring.
Not at that time, but if we wait another, I guess where I'm at is if we wait another year, the study, if we did the study, even if we had it all teed up, ready to go in January, we get the study back this time next year, roughly May, it puts us really, when we'd be taking effect for it, if we jump the gun, it would be next summer, otherwise it would be 2023, when we'd be really, the results of the study would really take effect as far as a budget purpose. I guess I'm afraid that's gonna be too long, in my opinion.
Just to speak to that, I did ask them if they'd be able to give us any guidance into 2022 as to an amount that we could increase the budget by to try and accommodate some of the findings come November. And they said by July, they would be able to give us maybe a rough estimate of what to increase the budget by in 2022 to accommodate what the study will find. I don't think it would be the full amount, but they'd be able to give us maybe a percentage or a range to say, you know, to move you towards your goal, increase by this amount, so.
And we said this was non-union, correct?
This is non-union, but it does work with our union employees when they're reviewing everything. So the union people aren't left out entirely. They are involved in the process. And then ultimately, that's what they're gonna use when they go to renegotiate those contracts.
Any other questions for Julie? None? Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2021-28, authorizing Gallagher to complete a job classification and total compensation study for the city of Becker.
I'll second that.
Motion from Rick, second from Mike. Any other discussion? Hearing none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
T-Town accessory structure language edits. Miss Mary Rowe.
Thank you. So we have recent inquiries have revealed that T-Town zoning district, our historical Becker district, does not have any language to address accessory structures. That is an issue. It's a use throughout all the other zoning districts in the code. So it is something that's missing. Staff has prepared accessory structure language to add accessory structures to that T-Town zoning district, and Planning Commission was in favor of those suggested changes. The language is district appropriate and modeled to be in conformance with existing code. So what we've done is added that subdivision 5 to the zoning chapter, listing the allowed uses. So accessory uses incidental to permitted uses and conditional uses of that zoning district, as well as garages, parking spaces, storage lockers, or tool sheds, which actually that was the question. Can someone have a tool shed to keep some lawn maintenance equipment in there? So we did add those accessory uses that would be permitted in the zoning district, as well as associated setbacks. T-Town zoning has 2 different types of setbacks, it depends on where you're located in that district. If you're on Hancock Street, there's some 0-foot setbacks because they're a lot smaller lots. They don't have on-site parking, things like that. So we did model those each after the setbacks after each of those sections, the Hancock Street and then the remaining area with appropriate setbacks for those structures. So if there are no questions, staff is looking for a motion and a second to approve ordinance 232 second series, which adds that language, as well as the series summary as a second motion. Second motion and second to approve that series summary.
If there's no questions, I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 232 second series.
Second. Motion from Mike, second from Robin. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mike, will you go to the second motion?
Oh, I make a motion to, for publication
Yes.
of 232 second series.
Second. Motion from Mike, second from Robin. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mary, go ahead and take us into Chapter 11, Home Occupation Language Edits.
All right, so we are presenting proposed changes to the home occupation requirements in the city. Planning Commission has actually been reviewing this language
since October of last year. Thanks to the pandemic, we weren't able to meet and have our public hearing. Finally, April 26th, we had our public hearing on the proposed edits. So what we're doing is proposing that home occupations would shift from either allowed outright or a conditional use to allowed outright or an interim use. The reason being that conditional uses, once they're approved, they do run with the property in perpetuity. So, you know, someone could have a home salon business and 20 years down the line, someone, you know, it's been through 3 or 4 owners and there's still a home salon business recorded on that title. So we're proposing to switch over to the interim use, which does have the ability through conditions to set a sunset date. You know, say when Becky moves out of her house, that's when the end of that approved home occupation will be. So there will still be, there's kind of a 2-type structure of the permitted outright is a very low level home occupation, something that you don't really see evidence of. There's nobody coming for sales on the site, and we can look at that language as well. But and then if you can't meet the low level, there is a higher level that requires that interim use permit that you would be able to apply for and have that reviewed. So we started with editing that home occupation definition. There were some regulations in that definition that weren't really serving their purpose there. So we left it as this is what a home occupation is, and then go to the zoning district for what regulations apply. And we did that. We also edited the kennel definition. Private versus commercial, we took out private. It was different from what the city code outright allows for number of dogs on a property. So it was a conflicting definition. I just kind of cleaned up the definition of commercial kennel. And then for those home occupation regulations, the agricultural zoning district, the R1, R2, large lot, and office commercial multifamily zoning districts will be the ones that have home occupation language in them, either allowed outright or under that interim use permit. And if you have any questions, I can definitely go over some of those regulations or.
We had a lot of discussion on this at Planning Commission.
Yeah.
Were there any public comments in regards to the public hearing?
None were received, no.
Okay.
I don't think anybody even showed up, did they?
They did not, no. And it was advertised in the paper as all of our zoning district, or zoning code amendments are, so. And again, that allowed outright is gonna be almost unseen. You know, you're running a business that has no outdoor storage, no signage, no employees other than yourself. Say you have like an Etsy store or something like that. If you can't meet that low level, there is that interim use that kicks in. You would be allowed a very small sign. You could have the equivalent of 1 full-time employee or subcontractor. Sales can happen on the premises so long as they're inside the primary dwelling. And then we have our regular conditions in there that you're used to seeing is no on-street parking shall be generated. And that they shall be conducted entirely within the principal dwelling unit. So there are tried and true favorite conditions out there, but just kind of 2 levels now. And if someone's not able to meet that interim use, then it is shown as quite a bit higher than what you would expect for a home occupation. So that would be something that we wouldn't see in a residential neighborhood. So if they can't meet the interim use, then they would be looking for probably a commercial space or something like that. And if there are no further questions, staff recommends a motion and a second to approve ordinance 233, second series. revising the zoning code to incorporate all those changes, as well as a motion and second to approve the series summary for publication.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 233 second series.
I'll second.
Motion from Robin and a second from Mike. All right, any other discussion on that? All those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried.
I will then make a motion to approve ordinance 233 second series summary for publication purposes.
I'll second that.
Motion from Robin, second from Mike. Any discussion on the summary? With none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. All right, Mary, extension of interim use permit for the temporary placement of a shipping container at the Becker Athletic Complex.
Thank you. So we have received, the city of Becker has received an application for an extension on a previously approved interim use permit on the Becker Athletic Complex property. It is for Becker Youth Baseball. They have a shipping container out there that they've been using to store their sports equipment in. The original interim use permit was approved in December of 2019 with a 9-month allowance for replacement or just outright removal. Their plan was to have the high school woodshop class build a permanent shed. However, with the COVID-19 pandemic, we had to, the kids weren't going into school, they were going to school from home, so that shop class wasn't able to meet. The replacement wasn't able to be built within that 9-month period. So they are now asking for an extension on that. There are plans and forward movement on the shed by the shop class. And so they are requesting an extension on this interim use permit so they can wrap that up and comply with code by removing that container and replacing it with something permanent. So if there are no questions, staff is requesting a motion and second to approve resolution 2021-31, a resolution extending that interim use permit.
And it shouldn't take them 9 months, correct? I mean, if the wood,
Yeah.
I mean, you're looking at like 2.
Yeah, end of the school year,
right.
most
Yeah.
likely, so.
Yeah.
But we did just, and that can be changed if you would
Yes.
like, but.
No, it says or less. I'm just,
Yes,
I
absolutely.
mean, I see the shed being built, so.
Yes, exactly.
So-
Yeah, there's forward movement on it,
Yes.
so that's what we like to see. And that's why the extension was, it's like, hey, we're back in school, let's get this done, so.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 21-31, extension of the conditional use permit for the storage container at the BAC.
I'll second.
Motion from Mike, second from Becky. Any other discussion? Hearing none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. All right, Mary, that's the end of your list. Thank you.
You don't want to do a Q1 financials while you're at it?
All right, Connie, looks like you're up for the remaining of the day here. So the 2021 first quarter financials with Ms. Robinson.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. So tonight before you, we have our first quarter financials, and there's a summary attached. And so Budget and Finance did review this on April 21st at our regular meeting. So just some key points. Of course, our revenues are kind of normally low for this time of year because of our timing with our tax settlement. Expenditures are slightly lower too overall. Community center, just a couple key points. The community center revenues have a $66,000 reduction year over year, and that's because we still aren't back to our pre-pandemic levels, and that's with memberships and whatnot being extended. However, our golf revenues are $139,000 higher than last year. With the expenditures, the community center expenditures are in line with the revenue decrease because of COVID restrictions with a $73,000 reduction year over year. So we are kind of keeping our eye on those amounts. And then our golf expenditures decreased 61,000 year over year and are lower than the budgeted rate at 14.69%. And then water and sewer are tracking lower, and that's normal for this time of year also. So if there's any questions, I can answer those.
All right, Connie, I hear no questions for you, so we can move right into the administrator and staff reports. Issuance and sale of $8.6 million general obligation street reconstruction bonds, Series 2021A, and levying tax for the payment.
All right, so as we roll into this, some key points. Jessica Green is here and she'll go through the bond sale summary and the resolution 2130, which you have a new version of that because of the bond sale today. But just a little bit of history here. We did have a bond rating call that took place on April 20th. So finance and the city administrator and community development director supported that call and went over the financials, the financial performance and strong position that we have here at the city of Becker, as well as our strong strength in our local tax base and economy within the city of Becker. And so then our draft press release was given to us, and then we actually have the press release and the credit rating confirming the A1 rating for us. And so right now I'll invite Jessica Green up to go through the bond sale summary and the resolution.
Okay.
Mayor, Council, good evening.
Good evening.
Is everyone okay if I take this down?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. So as Connie mentioned, we went through that rating process, and I'll just have a few brief comments here on the rating report that's in your packet prior to jumping into the bond sale summary. But overall, the rating report did come back with an affirmed rating of A1, and that's what the city's previous bond issues have been rated in the past several years. So no real surprises here in the report, very similar to the reports that have been issued in the past. Overall, from a credit challenges perspective, they of course mentioned the concentration in the tax base. Again, no surprise with that one, but that's mitigated by the expectation that Excel will continue to invest pretty heavily here in the city and in the assets that they have. Also credit positive, they did mention some of the growth that the city has been experiencing and development that's occurring here. That's also expected to continue. And then from a financial management position, some really strong positive comments there coming back from Moody's, referencing the strong liquidity, and also, as you saw with the rating report, some really strong levels of cash in reserves here. So some credit positives there. I'll move into the sales summary unless council has questions on that rating report. There is the full report in your packet, of course, for your review. Okay. So obviously staff and council have been working through the preparing for the sale for a number of months now. So I'm happy to say as we sort of close out the sale process that we have some really nice results to share with you tonight. So the sale report looks like this on the cover. What we've got here is $7,725,000 in general obligation street reconstruction bonds. This will be considered Series 2021A for the city. So we'll move on to that second page. This is just a really high-level summary here. So proceeds of the bonds will be used to finance various street reconstruction projects here. So you've got a number of different sections of streets that are mentioned. The bonds were also sized to pay the cost of issuance associated with the bonds. We have a relatively level principal and interest structure over 10 years. The security here will be ad valorem taxes, so property tax levy will support the debt service. The method of sale here was a public sale, so we did accept bids on the city's behalf this morning at 10 a.m. Happy to say that we had 5 bids come in, with Piper out of Minneapolis providing the low bid. Again, that rating being A1 as provided by Moody's. You've got a final maturity here of 2032 and then an optional call of February 1 of 2029, meaning that at that point you can call in the bonds in whole or in part. So if you find yourself with extra cash, you can certainly call those bonds in. The table on the bottom just provides a comparison from what was considered in, or estimated, I should say, in the finance plan that we went over a few weeks ago. So when we were looking at that finance plan and developing that structure, we had targeted an amount of $8.6 million. What we came away with today is $7,725,000, and that's the result of a good amount of premium being received on the bonds. And we'll go over premium a little bit further into the sale report, but really ultimately what that means is that investors are looking for a higher stated rate or coupon on the bonds, so they're willing to give you cash upfront to get that. As far as the all-inclusive cost, we went from an estimated 1.91 down to 1.31, and then the true interest cost dropped from 1.78 to 1.18%. So really, really nice drop in the interest rate. We did see some volatility that started back mid-February, but we've seen some very small but steady corrections in the market over the past couple of months. So that really played into that 60 basis point drop. So really nice to see that today. The next page is your bid tabulation. So these are the 5 bids that were received, with Piper again being the low bid. UBS provided the cover bid. They were about 1 basis points different, and that means that we got a really strong, nice reaction from the market. The spread sort of widens there as you go out, but again, seeing those bids come in together means that we got an aggressive bid there. So really nice to see that. On the next page, you will see the sources and uses. At the top there, you've got the par amount of bonds being $7,725,000. You've got the reoffering premium of just shy of $915,000. And again, what that premium means is that the investors are willing to give you cash today to make up for the interest rate that they're seeking on the bonds. So with that, I'm going to direct your attention to the middle of the page. And then in the third column, from the left, you'll see the coupon there. So for the front end of the bonds, you see 4% coupons, and then in the later years, you'll see 2%. But what's important to pay attention to is the yield, so that next column over. So you can see that the yield, once we factor in that premium, that cash being received, what the city is really paying. So for example, on the 23 maturity, you've got a yield of 0.25%. On the 24, 0.35, and so on and so forth, and that ascending factor there for the entirety of the bond issue. Overall, you can see the debt service schedules on the following 2 pages. So going on to page 5, we've got a total debt service amount of around, or averaging out to be around $905,000. When we went over that finance plan, we were planning for about $937,000, so a really nice reduction there. And then once we go on to, that next page, I thought we had one additional schedule here. What I would just note is that with the levy, so the 5% over levy that is calculated when you're setting your tax levy, that'll be around $950,000. When we went over that finance plan, we were at about $985,000. So again, nice drop to maintain the integrity of the levy and not see any major swings there, being that you've got some debt service that's retiring off. The next page on page 6 is just the local issuance, so the Minnesota issues that are going to be pricing and selling this week. And then the last 2 pages are just a couple of graphs to show you. The first one on page 7 is a 5-year snapshot of what we've seen in interest rates recently. And then you can see on page 8 a more long-term snapshot about 20 years out. So it really just sort of drives home the notion that we are in such a low interest rate environment currently, really leading to that low interest rate on the bonds that was received today. So I will congratulate the council and the city on a very successful bond sale today, but I'm happy to take any questions that the council may have.
Any questions for Ms. Green? No?
A lot of work, a lot of meetings, a lot of
Yeah.
lot of everything to get to this point. So.
All right, so we have a motion then to accept.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2130, providing for the issuance and sale of 7,725,000 Geo Street reconstruction bonds.
I'll second that.
Motion from Rick, second from Mike. Any other discussion? With none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, declaring the official intent to reimburse project costs from the future debt service. Connie.
Okay, so now that we've adopted the street reconstruction plan and authorized the bonds, the street reconstruction process may begin sooner than when we get the bond proceeds. So this resolution just makes it possible for us to reimburse our funds if we use funds, other funds besides the bond proceeds ahead of schedule. And so if there's any questions, I can answer those. Otherwise, a motion and second to adopt Resolution 2132 declaring the official intent to reimburse project costs from a future debt issuance would be appreciated.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to adopt Resolution 2132.
I'll second.
Motion from Robin, second from Rick. Any other discussion? With none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Connie. Let's go into declaring the official intent to reimburse.
All right, and this one is with our $20.5 million project for the Business Park Re-Infrastructure Project. And again, the project will require the city to make expenditures and apply for reimbursement after such expenditures are paid. Therefore, this makes it a possibility that we may have to do some short-term borrowing in anticipation of the grant reimbursement. So this resolution allows us to do that short-term borrowing if necessary. It probably will be necessary, let's say it that way. And so if there's any questions, I can answer them. Otherwise, a motion and second to adopt Resolution 2133, declaring the official intent to reimburse project costs from a future debt issuance would be appreciated.
Is it the county that handles the funds, or is it just MnDOT that handles the funds?
It's the state that handles that.
So, we gotta do the work, pay for it, submit
Right.
the bill, basically.
Right, and there's 4 projects if I'm not mistaken, and it sounds like we can maybe apply for those reimbursements after I'm losing the term here, after the design phase, is that correct? After the design phase, we can maybe get some reimbursement from each project.
Okay, so you need a motion for Resolution 2133, I believe it is, right?
Yes.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Motion from Mike, second from Becky. Any other discussion? With none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. All right, thank you, Connie.
Thank you.
The consent agenda with Mr. Przezinski.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. City Council consent agenda for May 4th, 2021. It is revised, so please take note of that. Item number 1, hiring and termination reports for Becker Community Center, Public Works, Pebble Creek, and Administration Finance. Item number 2, donation acceptance from the Becker Lions Club. Item number 3, ordinance 234 second series. Item number 4, declaring property surplus and ordering its disposal. And then also item number 5, which is an addition, the finance director job description update, and that does trigger a reclassification of pay schedule, so I want to bring that to your attention. If you have any comments or questions, I can certainly try to address those right now. Otherwise, a motion to adopt the consent agenda for May 4th, 2021 would be appreciated.
And personnel did review the finance director again, but we didn't. Do you remember what month we?
That was in August.
It was in August.
Yep.
This last summer we did, but there was the urgent push for the community development restructure, and so we withheld this one and pushed the other 2 through. So this was just kind of a perfect timing now to push it through as a change.
I would add one additional thing to that. We did do a internal reread on it, so I think we've captured everything.
So we reviewed all three of them in August, and we're just doing this now.
Yes, we withheld the finance director one from going through because we were working on, there was two from the,
There was three.
three.
Finance director, community development director, and city clerk.
And clerk.
Then on the ordinance 234 one, was that really a jump of 1,000 to 175,000? That's not a misprint? It's
Not a misprint, no.
Yeah, I did think the same thing. I was like,
I was about to email on it.
any other questions for Mr. Przinski?
The motion to accept the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
Motion from Robin, second from Mike. Any other discussion? With none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Payment of the bills.
Make a motion to pay the bills?
Second?
Motion from Rick, second from Robin. Any discussion? With none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Anniversary announcements for the month of May. We have 3. Congratulations to Phil Knutson for our Public Services Director. He's celebrating 2 years with us. Sean Shaver is celebrating his first year in the he's our IS manager. And then Kristen Hines, the Administrative Support Specialist, is celebrating her 3rd year with us this May. So congratulations to those employees. Does council have anything else for the betterment of Becker? If not, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
I move adjourn.
Second?
Motion from Mike, second from Rick. Those in favor can state aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned at 6:11 p.m. Are we okay with a quick break? I need to catch Lori.
Yeah.
What issues?